You're listening to a sermon from Grace Church, located in Frisco, Texas. Get to know Grace Church better by visiting our website at www.gracechurchfrisco.org. Today's speaker is Pastor Caleb Wilkinson.
Our mini sermon series called Summertime Blues, where we've studied the Psalms of Lament and discerned a path for how we can live in this world that really isn't as it should be, where the universal human experience requires lament. 200 years ago, a man named Adoniram Judson became the first missionary sent from the U.S. And after years of very challenging labor there, he received a letter with the most heartbreaking news of his life. It read, "My dear sir, to one who has suffered so much and with such exemplary fortitude, there needs but little preface to tell a tale of distress. It were cruel indeed to torture you with doubt and suspense. To sum up the unhappy tidings in a few words, Mrs. Judson is no more. His wife, Nancy, his dearest friend, was dead. And over the next years, Adoniram battled dark shadows of grief and distress. He moved into a jungle. He despaired of life. He isolated from everyone. And at one point, he wrote a letter home saying, "Have you learned the art of real communion with God? God, to me, is the great unknown. I believe in him, but I find him not." In his pain, Adoniram felt completely abandoned by God. And it was a long, painful journey through a river of tears. But 5 years later, when another missionary lost her husband, he wrote her this letter. "You're now drinking the bitter cup whose sediments I'm somewhat acquainted with. And though for some time you've been aware of its approach, I venture to say that it is far more bitter than you expected. I can assure you that months and months of heart-rending anguish are before you, whether you will or not. Yet, take the cup with both hands and sit down for your meal. You'll soon learn a secret, that there's sweetness at the bottom." Did you hear Adoniram's counsel to this new widow? He says, at the bottom of suffering's bitter cup, there's sweetness. And so take it with both hands and drink with hope, with anticipation of that sweetness. Now, you may think your current pain can't compare to Adoniram's, but the fact is we all suffer. And there's some in this room suffering deeply right now and wonder what possible sweetness could be at the bottom of this cup in my hands. I don't want it, even I reject it. And if you're not suffering now, just take a look around, because someone near you is. And if you're not suffering now, it's just a matter of time. Someday you will be. Somehow, some way, you'll be faced with a bitter cup. Sometimes we see it coming, and sometimes it blindsides us, but suffering will enter everyone's door in this fallen world. Bob Dylan once sang, "Everything is broken." He's right. Everything. And so we don't have the luxury of keeping our eyes open and being romantics, where we think that somehow we can escape the bitter cup of suffering. And so that's likely why nearly half of the content in the Psalms is lament, where the psalmists describe their distress and mourn their situations. Here in the Psalms of Lament, they vividly record the emotional and spiritual drama of everyone who's ever suffered and give us space to voice our own cries. Lamenting is a lost art in our day, in this culture. We just don't know how to do it. But the lament psalms can tutor us on how to suffer faithfully. Today, Psalms 42 and 43 will instruct us to suffer with hope, to lament and hope. Psalms 42 and 43, they really work as a single unit, most likely originally written as one psalm, to show us how to get to the bottom of this bitter cup, how to get to the sweetness at the bottom. And so let's dive in. And as we do, let's remember we're not diving into human wisdom here. This isn't theory, this isn't philosophy. The God who made and sustains everything is speaking to us this morning. And so may God bless the reading and preaching and hearing and application of his word. Read along with me, starting Psalm 42. To the choir master, a maskil of the sons of Korah. As a deer pants for flowing streams, so my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with loud shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and of Hermon, from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. Vindicate me, O God, and defend my cause against an ungodly people. From the deceitful and unjust man, deliver me. For you are the God in whom I take refuge. Why have you rejected me? Why do I go about mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? Send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your dwelling. Then I will go to the altar of God, to God, my exceeding joy, and I will praise you with the lyre, O God, my God. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. How do we get to the sweetness at the bottom of suffering's bitter cup? How do we lament well? God himself shows us that the sweetness at the bottom of the bitter cup comes with hope. This is how it works. Hope in God's sweet presence transforms Lament's bitter experience. And so together, these psalms have 3 stanzas with one refrain that repeats itself. And we're going to take one section at a time. We'll first look at the psalmist's bitter experience, and then his expectation of God's sweet presence, and then his experience of God's sweet presence. So first, we'll look at the bitter experience of lament. Our psalm begins with one of the most vivid pictures in the entire Bible. Verse 1, as the deer pants for flowing streams, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. Some biblical history is helpful here. In the Old Testament, God promised to be with his children, but this didn't mean the same thing it means to us. It's a bit different because when the tabernacle and then the temple was built, God's glory filled the most holy place there. And God was with his people everywhere, but to experience him most fully, you had to go to his residence in Jerusalem. And we read in verse 6 that this psalmist says he's by Mount Hermon, which is in the far north of Israel, very far, especially before modern transportation, very far from Jerusalem. So we don't know the situation. We really don't even know who this man is or why he's been dislocated, but we do know this, that he's been separated from God's localized presence. He hasn't lost his belief in God, but his sweet experience of meeting with God. And so the image of a deer panting for streams of water is really perfect because a deer needs constant access to water. It's not like a camel who can dwell in the desert and be without water for days. A deer needs constant access to water. So this panting doesn't depict having enough and just wanting more, but not having what you need. Human beings were meant to experience God's presence and love as much as a deer needs water. And so this isn't a God worshiper wanting just to go deeper in intimacy, like a dry-mouthed deer in the desert longing for a sip of a cool stream where there is none. He feels like he's lost God, his greatest need. This is what his lament is about, God's perceived absence. And it's bitter, it's even unbearable. So we ask in verse 2, when shall I come and appear before God? Enough is enough. I'm done here. I can't go on. And we can see why. Look at verses 3 and 4. He's on a special diet. He's on a diet of tears. He's crying habitually, 24/7. He says, my tears have been my food day and night. So breakfast time, tears. Lunchtime, more tears. Dinner time, tears. At night, a tear-drenched pillow. And in the morning, he hits repeat. More tears. Same diet. Has anyone been here? Others intensify his pain with accusations that are kind of disguised as questions. He feels God's absence more because others are constantly asking him, where's your God? And his own memory intensifies his pain. He remembers better days when he was in God's presence with God's people. He used to go to the sanctuary. He used to experience this sweetness of fellowship with God in community. So he knows this God well, and thus he knows what is missing. So his memory leaves this big hole in his soul. He says, these things I remember as I pour out my soul. So we're to imagine a cup of water being poured out here. This is what's happening to his soul. He's spent. He's on despair's doorstep. Depression is taking hold of him. But look, somehow he resists being taken. He questions himself in verse 5. He says, "Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God." And so what he's doing here is he's challenging his very real and very painful experience of God's perceived absence. He's not minimizing his pain, but in his pain, urging himself to hope, to envision a time when he'll experience the Lord once again, to look past his current bitter circumstances, his current bitter drink to the bottom of the cup. Where God will return him to worship. So what's he doing? He's injecting hope into his lament. Listen, biblical hope isn't the same as optimism. Like, I really hope that traffic on the tollway won't happen tomorrow. It's not seeing how circumstances could or will even likely work out favorably and sort of playing those odds in your mind. Hope in the Bible isn't some sort of pop psychology trick to help you feel better. The Hebrew words for hope are waiting and tense expectation. Like, imagine a cord being pulled from both sides and seeing that tension. That's what biblical hope is. And biblical hope isn't focused on circumstances at all, but a person. He says, hope in God. The psalmist resists entering despair's door by making a decision to wait for God. Not some great deity out there somewhere. Pronouns are super important. He's hoping in my salvation and my God. This is his God. He's praised God in the past because he knows who God is. He's holy, he's gracious, he's strong and loyal. And because he knows his God, he calls himself to anticipation. Expect God, my God, to show up. You know, oftentimes we think of hope and lament as a binary option, like you see as a slide right here. You can either lament or you can hope. If I can just hope, I won't lament. If I'm lamenting, I can't possibly be hoping. We view it like turning a light on or off. It's either on or it's off. It's either or. We even counsel one another like this, with this mindset. You know, if you just add faith and if you just add hope, that will sort of tip the scales and take the darkness away. This mindset is prevalent in the church. Christian radio is often filled with this sort of thing, and maybe more sadly, it's misshaped many Christian funerals. It's all over the landscape of the church, and it's serious because this imagery isn't only wrong, it does damage to the suffering soul. It does damage to the hurting person, and it has no place in the church. No place. The fallen human experience necessitates lament. And so we must make space for it. You see, the psalmist isn't trying to become lament-free here, but to add something to his lament. He's operating from a completely different paradigm, one that looks like the next slide. This is a bit more complex. It's a quadrant. It's not a binary option, and on it, the higher you go, you have hope. The lower you go, you have no hope. The farther to the right you go, you have lament. The farther to the left you go, you have no lament. And so notice the difference between unrelenting despair and faithful suffering on the right. It's not lament. Both see the broken reality of the world with open eyes, and they don't ignore its suffering. Those who don't see suffering, or maybe out of self-protection, ignore it, are on the left. And the ones on the left with hope, the top left, with hope and no lament, they don't acknowledge suffering. This is naive optimism, or Christian naive optimism, or you could call it romanticism. But another perennial way to cope with this fallen world is just to close your eyes to suffering and hope, to detach yourself from both and embrace being a stoic. So both of these options, close your eyes to the real world, and both of these options do damage to self and to others. But back to those on the right. Despair occurs when you rightly see with open eyes the brokenness in this world, but you don't see or embrace hope. Cynicism is a form of this, and it's prevalent and even accepted in the church, at work, in family life. You see brokenness, but without hope. Now, on the other hand, top right, you see faithful suffering lives with eyes open to two things simultaneously: hope and lament. Not hope after lament. Hope and lament simultaneously. The psalmist is trying to live here. He's not trying so much to turn a light in a dark room on, so much as to light a fire outside on a dark, cold, cloudy night. So he's not taking the night away, but adding light to it, adding anticipation to distress, injecting the posture of waiting into his lament. He's not trading. He's adding without subtracting lament. So if you like spending the night outside, you know the difference a fire makes. On one hand, it doesn't really do anything to the night. And on the other, it's a game changer. It makes the night bearable. It changes everything. Some in this room are going through chronic pain. Your body is broken, it's riddled with pain. Maybe it was even difficult for you to get here this morning. Maybe you can't hang out with people like you used to. You can't join the prayer meeting. You can't fellowship in small group like you're used to. You feel cut off from fellowship. And in that, you feel cut off from your God. You're suffering. Others in this room are in grief, or you know someone that's in grief. You're in grief through sickness, death, a broken relationship, maybe a big move to Frisco. You've lost someone who has stirred your walk with God. And so it feels like you haven't just lost that person, you've lost God in that process. Oh, friends, this psalm is a gift from your compassionate God to you in these dark shadowlands. Hear me, this psalm isn't charging you to put your lament away and somehow subtract suffering. Just turn the light on and embrace naive optimism. No, it's inviting you with feeble hands, probably with the help of others, to keep a fire kindled in this dark night. Don't sit down in the dark. Don't give in to unrelenting despair. Add hope. And make sure that hope is well directed, because, in fact, everyone hopes in something. But suffering friend, what do you find yourself hoping in? Are you waiting for changed circumstances? Healing? New person to replace the person you've lost? A restored relationship? Now, these are good things. We should and can be praying for them. But God's saying to you, hope in me. Expect to savor my presence again. Put your energy here because the sweetness you long for in your current bitter cup, sweetness is in me alone. The next section is going to show us what this man's fire looks like in the dark night of lament. So now we're going to look at his expectation of God's sweet presence in his current bitter experience. So as we move to the next stanza, nothing changes in his circumstances. He's still in the same geographical place. And while the fire hope is lit, his bitter experience remains. He's still in the depths. In verse 6 and 7, he says, my soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and of Hermon, from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All of your breakers and your waves have gone over me. So this wrestling match of injecting hope into his bitter lament has really just begun. It's like a gust of wind blows over the fire he's trying to keep kindled, and it blows it to a flicker, and it might even seem even darker now. So right away he tries rekindling hope's fire. He's blowing on it. He's poking it. Therefore I remember you. But his attempt seems short-lived. Another vivid picture is given here. His circumstances are overwhelming him like a giant waterfall pushing him down. His footing is gone, and wave after wave is submerging him in deeper and deeper. And notice, they're not just any waterfalls and waves. He says, your waterfalls, your waves are what's pummeling me. Watch, he's beginning to have hard thoughts about his God. And so do you see this tense wrestling match, the ambivalence? But somehow his faith keeps reasserting itself. The wind is blowing. Hope's fire is flickering, but he keeps blowing and poking and keeping the fire alive. He keeps kindling it. Verse 8, by the day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. Friends, this is probably a long process, a long experience. It's not hours, maybe not even days, maybe not even weeks. This might be months, years. He's right to look at God's past faithfulness. It's what fuels hope for the future. We look forward by looking backward. He's believing right theology here. He's remembering God's loyal, and his loyal love hasn't left him. He's reporting, praying, and singing to God even. My God, the God of my life. And still his beliefs about God are just so very different from his experience of God. And hence this vacillating tension. Right when the fire seemed lit, it's blown down again. It's kind of blown to coals or a flicker again. So verses 9 and 10, he says, I say to God, my God, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? He was just describing singing and praying to God, but now he addresses God directly. And this is actually where he enters the first of those 4 stages of lament that we've looked at. There'll be a slide. He's turning to God directly here. And he immediately takes the second step and complains. And this is a weighty complaint because he accuses God of divine abandonment. He immediately takes this step from turning. He accuses God of divine abandonment. It seems even darker now. He's not just lost access to God. He feels God's been neglectful. God is the one who's lost him. So look at the evidence. He hasn't come to deliver him from this trial yet. And his foes' persecuting words are just killing him. They're like poison underneath his skin, kind of this deadly wound in his bone. And they're shaping his own accusations of God's absence. So he's even closer, actually, than ever to falling into this unrelenting pit of despair. And we need to acknowledge that this makes sense. Paul Tripp says, suffering is dangerous. It exposes our hearts to temptations as never before. C.S. Lewis explains the temptation well after his wife died. He says, I don't think I'm in much danger of ceasing to believe in God. The real danger is of coming to believe such dreadful things about him. The conclusion I dread is not, so there's no God after all, but so this is what God's really like. Deceive yourself no longer. If we think that he's the type of God who drowns his children underneath his waterfalls, who deserts them, if we come to hold such hard thoughts about God, our hope will be done. Because we won't hope in a God we hate. And so you see, our psalmist is on the dreadful edge of darkness, hanging over the ledge. It seems like the light is about to be stomped out for good. But God won't let it go. It's almost as if God is behind the scenes blowing on the fire as well. And so his trembling fingers don't let go of the cliffs of God's great grace. He hangs on to hope. Now, this might look very weak, but as John Newton puts it, faith is never stronger than when it's most tried. And so he blows on the flickering fire one more time. Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. So he was praying and singing and talking to God. He was listening to his circumstances, to his enemies, to his own heart. But now he does something that he actually did before, but maybe with more desperation. He sort of takes hold of himself. He stops listening to himself and he starts preaching to himself. He says, self, listen to me. Self, anticipate your God. Anticipate his sweet presence. He's coming. Wait for him. Why? This is a helpful move, but why? Well, do you want to know who the most influential person in your life is? It's not your enemies. It's not actually your friends, your family. It's you. Paul Tripp argues, no one is more influential in your life than you are because no one talks to you more than you do. You are in an unending conversation with yourself. How well are you counseling yourself? So imagine it, you talking to you. What's that conversation look like? Many of us are suffering in this room right now because of our own sin. You're feeling far from God in it, and now while there's no indicator in this psalm that that's why this guy is suffering, there's no indicator at all, and sin isn't the only reason we suffer. We all know that we suffer because of our own sin. And it interrupts our communion with God. Like after we sin, we can feel like he's removed from us. So is one big sin or is some small habitual sin cause you to think, God's given up on me? He's done with me. How are you counseling yourself? How are you talking back to that thought? I'll clean myself up. I'll try harder next time. Then I'll be presentable. Then I'll be acceptable. Then I'll experience his presence again. Friend, if this is you, you're not hoping in God. You're hoping in yourself. You're putting your hope in your efforts, in your goodness. Paul Tripp counsels us again when he says, the door to hope is hopelessness. The door to hope is hopelessness. What he means is that you don't hope in God and hope in yourself. You hope in God when you're hopeless of everything else, including yourself. So banking our hope on our ability to change ourselves, it's a misdirected false hope. Remember, biblical hope is based on God's character. He's holy, he's gracious, he forgives, he changes hearts, he saves. He doesn't abandon his children when they sin. They may lose communion with him for a time, but never union with him. So real hope is hope in God and nothing else. And so if you feel like God's turned his back on you because of your sin, I encourage you to take yourself by the shirt and preach to yourself. Self, God saves sinners. That's the gospel. God saves sinners like you. Like you. Wait for his steadfast love and his redemption. Don't despair. Expect when he comes, you will praise him again. So talk to yourself like that. Maybe not audibly in public, but preach to yourself like that. Preach the gospel to yourself. What's going to happen next? We're going to move to Psalm 43, but again, probably originally written as one psalm. And we're going to see his experience of God's sweet presence. So we heard the psalmist question and accuse God, but now we hear his first plea for help. It's the next step in the path of lament. It's him asking. It's a request. And so this is his request. He says, "Vindicate me, O God, and defend my cause against an ungodly people. From the deceitful and unjust man, deliver me. For you're the God in whom I take refuge." Okay, so remember, the door to hope is hopelessness, and this man has concluded, God's my only possible hope here. He's his refuge. His circumstances haven't changed a lick. His enemies are still there, and he's still sad, and he's still complaining. Why have you rejected me? Why do I go about mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? But his experience is now seen on the backdrop of his convictions. It's still nighttime, but the fire is well established. There's now solid hope in his lament, and nothing's going to put it out. And so he continues to press God to rescue him from his distress. In verses 3 and 4, he says, "Send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me." Hear the confidence. "Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your dwelling. Then I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy. And I will praise you with the lyre, O God, my God." Now, it might sound like he's asking for changed circumstances there because he says, "Bring me to your holy hill." But this would be sort of a really bizarre way of saying it, because he's saying, "Send me your light and your truth," which wouldn't be much of vehicles to transport him to Jerusalem. No, he's not asking for changed circumstances. He's confidently asking God to dispel this darkness without a relocation. And so just notice the tone change. His expectation of God's answer has transformed his lament. He's enjoying him already. "To God, my exceeding joy, and I will praise you with the lyre, O God, my God." And so he sings the refrain again, but it's like a typical country song, which sort of the chorus means something different than it does at the end. And so by the end, he's saying the same words, but he's saying, why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. It sounds different because hope has brought him to the God he's lost. He's now tasting the sweetness at the bottom of the bitter cup. As some of you know, we moved here from Arizona, and that we often go back, and that I love spending time in the Grand Canyon, running and hiking in the Grand Canyon. I do it quite a bit. And I'll tell you, no matter how many times I do it, it's sort of always a bit miserable climbing out of that thing. I bet you can imagine if you've not done it. You're always climbing out, and you're looking at the top of the rim, and you're thinking, I've made no progress. I'm never going to get out of here. You're hot, you're tired, you're hungry, and it feels a bit miserable. I don't know why I keep doing it. Maybe I'm a masochist, but and my routine when I do get out is to go to Wendy's and get a large Frosty and extra salty, extra large fry. It's really good after that miserable experience. But I don't begin thinking of Wendy's when I get to the rim. I begin thinking of Wendy's when I'm down hiking up and it starts getting challenging. And let me tell you, thinking of Wendy's changes my hike up. It doesn't take away the misery. I'm still having those thoughts. I'm never going to get up here. Why did I do this again? This must be what women do when they have another baby, this amnesia. Why am I here again? However, I start anticipating how good that salty fry dipped in the perfect ice cream that Wendy discovered is going to be. And it begins to refresh me and energize me. And it's almost like I can taste it when I'm hours away from it. In a greater way, this is what the psalmist has found, I think. Outwardly, nothing's changed, but he's describing God as his exceeding joy, like someone already enjoying him. You see, his hope is alive beside his still present lament. It hasn't been crushed by it. His hope and lament, they coexist on the path to his real final destination, where he's now arrived. The last stage of lament that we've looked at, trust. I mean, it's almost as if lament is the train tracks, carrying him down the path we've looked at. Lament's the train tracks, and hope is the train, carrying him along the tracks, complementing one another perfectly. Now, for many in this room, tomorrow begins another grueling work week. Do you lament your workplace? You're surrounded by people maybe who don't know God or just overtly reject him and his ways, or maybe you think you could be doing something more meaningful, more spiritual. You're having trouble sensing God's presence at work because of the type of work you do or the people you work with. You know, you feel God's presence here on Sunday mornings or in your small group, but in those 40 hours, you feel abandoned. And you've sort of resolved, God just doesn't care about my work. I'm alone here for these 40 hours. What I'd say to you is, first, God doesn't want you just to suck it up, say no biggie, to stop being bothered. He doesn't call us people to ignore brokenness and be stoics, because God is not a stoic. And he also doesn't want you to settle for this lie of a sacred-secular divide where you see the brokenness, but you stop anticipating him meeting you right there, because God doesn't meet us in this type of work. You stop expecting that he'll meet you right there. Listen, he doesn't want you to be a cynic. He's not a cynic. Listen, the psalm teaches you how to lament over the brokenness in your workplace. Lament is not merely complaining. It's crying out to God from a place of honesty, but with hope. So don't be a stoic and don't be a cynic at work. Don't be a stoic and ignore the wrong. And don't be a cynic and ignore hoping in God meeting you there. Suffer faithfully. Combine hope with lament. God's telling you, in your hurt and disappointment at work, wait for me. Anticipate me showing up. Yes, in this type of work. Yes, with those people. Don't put your hope in getting a promotion or new coworkers or a new job. Don't wait for different circumstances. Those might be good things to do, but don't wait, don't hope, don't anticipate those ultimately. Primarily, expect me to meet you and satisfy you here in your workplace. Lament, and lament with hope. Communion helps us do this. Communion reminds us why we can lament and why we can hope, because communion points us to Jesus, who's the one person who's lived out these Psalms we've been reading like no one else has. Think about it. Jesus, God himself, chose to go out from his Father's immediate presence to become the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. The God-man lived a life where tears were his food. He did not celebrate, but wept at his friend Lazarus' death and mourned over the state of Jerusalem. His soul thirsted for God in his wilderness temptations. His soul was cast down and poured out in the garden to the point that he was sweating blood. There he pleaded with the Father, if possible, let this bitter cup of suffering, your wrath, pass by me. But then he marched straight to the place of ultimate divine abandonment, the cross. And there he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? But unlike the psalmist, God the Father actually did abandon Jesus. And there, naked, bleeding, humiliated, in the depths of divine abandonment, he was mocked by his enemies. Where's your God now? Jesus, the perfect man, he was not a romantic. He was not a stoic. He wasn't a cynic. He was a man of sorrows, which means that our God is a God of sorrows, a God of lament, because Jesus is a man of lament. So even there, though, on the cross, in the pits of lament, the light of his hope in God wasn't snuffed out. On the cross, in anguish, Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. See, Jesus hoped in God until the very end, even as he lived and died as the man of sorrows and one acquainted with grief. Why'd he do this? Why'd he live out this psalm? As we take communion, think about this. He did this, for one, so that we could know how sweet his love is for us. He knew we'd prefer better circumstances to him, that that's where we'd be prone to put our hope. And still, he loved us more than better circumstances for himself, so that we could see that he loves us like that, and so that we could experience that his love is better than life, so that we would desire to experience it even more than changed circumstances. So he did it to ensure that our hope is in God more than in change. And he did it so that we would have a more sure hope than ourselves, so that we could know with far greater confidence than the psalmist we're reading that God would never abandon us, because Jesus was abandoned for us already. Listen, if you're a Christ follower, we're his, we're Christ's ones, which means he won't leave us. Communion foreshadows the day we'll feast with him face to face, a day when he'll wipe away every single tear we've ever cried. On that day, there'll be no more laments, ever. It sounds crazy, but it's based on a person who went before us, who overcame death, and who now sits at the right hand of the Father with complete joy. And so Jesus lived this psalm out as a foretaste for us to live out. He took the bitter cup by both hands so that we could follow him through to the sweetness at the bottom, to his loving presence. That's what communion's reminding us of. So, Christ won. No matter how far you feel from God, no matter how deep your hurt and lament, no matter how dark your night is, don't blow out the fire of hope. Keep it kindled. With Christ, these dark caves of lament are really tunnels leading to fields of his sweet presence. And so let's let communion spur us on to wait for a future that's as surprising as a crucified man rising from the grave. May this table help us remember that our hope is cross-shaped. Let's lament and let's hope in God because of Jesus.
Thank you for listening to this sermon from Grace Church. To receive future messages, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or listen online by visiting our website at gracechurchfrisco.org.